I'm here with Dr. Kat Lindley, and you're head of the Global Health Project. Kat, would you like to start off by just telling us a bit about the Global Health Project?
So we got together about 2 years ago. It was summer as well. And we wanted to try to find a way to communicate about what's happening to more people, because we always felt that we're talking in a bubble. So this is a coalition of physicians, scientists, moms, journalists that got together, and we did this project of trying to find voices to tell what happened for the past few years. And interestingly, we all thought that public is going to want to hear from the kids, but public wanted to hear from the doctors. And our message was that even doctors were fooled by what happened. And it took some of us, different times to understand what's going on. But once we did, we decided to look for a better ethical way to communicate with our patients, and also kind of tell the truth of what's happening and what's been happening to all of us.
And where are you at now?
So I'm in Texas. I live in Texas.
Yeah, but where's the organization at now?
So now the GHP has kind of moved away from the message of physicians. And because of my interest on global governance and World Health Organization, we've done a lot of videos with what's happening with the World Health Organization. And we didn't really try to tell the story. We let the World Health Organization tell the story. So we have these videos that we put together of Tedros speaking, or different scientists from the World Health Organization, and in their own words, say what they've been trying to do for these past few years.
Right. Well, let's jump into some of these subjects, and that'll be great for me. What about the information around the bird flu that's been flying around? Give us a few of your comments on that.
So that's really interesting, right? I think bird flu may be the next pandemic. The reason I say that, not because I'm concerned about it, but bird flu gives them a perfect cover story for One Health agenda. For those of you who have followed the World Health Organization, you probably remember that there is something called Pandemic Treaty, and they were not able to find an agreement this past May in Geneva, so they did not pass the Pandemic Treaty, but they did pass the amendments to international health regulation. They were a little bit watered down, but they still passed. Now, the One Health is part of the Pandemic Treaty. And the reason I say bird flu is interesting is because it's a perfect cover story for One Health. It gives them this spillover story, which is that you have this virus jumping species coming from the bird flu to the cattle, poultry, and then ultimately to humans. And recently, Redfield, Dr. Redfield, who used to be in charge of CDC, I believe, he gave an interview, and in this interview, he said that they've been doing the gain of function research on the bird flu, and that he knows specifically if you change certain amino acids of this virus, that you can make it more virulent, and you can make mortality rate up to 50%. Another interesting thing is, if you are watching the United States, you may have noticed that our Human and Health Services have given a contract to Moderna to make the mRNA vaccine for the bird flu. They're also going to give another contract to Pfizer to do the same. So the reason I say we need to be watchful of what's happening is because you have this One Health agenda on one side, you have the spillover, you have Redfield telling you it has potential for increased mortality. You have Big Pharma already making the mRNA products. And then you have elections in the United States coming up. So Interestingly, I would say we need to watch it. Now, am I really concerned about the bird flu itself? Not really. By every indication we have so far, the cases we've had in the United States, they're very mild. They presented with mild conjunctivitis, and farmers that contracted the disease were able to have no issues with it.
Right. Thank you. Well, tell us about the World Health Organization and your pushback on what they've been doing. I mean, I know you've gone through it a little bit, but would you like to expand?
Sure. So I was actually in Geneva at the end of May when they were finishing the negotiations, and they were unable to pass the pandemic treaty because the countries pushed back. And you would think that the countries pushed back because they realized it's such a bad thing that we shouldn't have it, but that really wasn't the reason. Some of the countries that pushed back because they wanted a little bit more financial incentives to sign up for it. Some of the countries that had reservations, like Slovakia and others, just said, well, we don't like it, but they didn't really push back too much on it. But what happened is the amendments to international health regulation did pass. They are a watered down version of what they were. They have taken out the language like binding recommendations, and now they are just recommendations. But I would venture to say that if WHO recommends something to Australian government or to my government, our CDC, FDA, NIH, all of them are going to say, well, WHO said it, so we have to do it. So whether binding or not doesn't really change anything. I think our governments are still going to push on it. One thing that they did pass in these amendments to international health regulation is more surveillance, more financial commitment from the member countries, and more censorship. So they are expecting our own governments and our own countries to censor the voices that dissent. And I think with whether we have bird flu or another pandemic or whatever comes down the line, we're going to see more and more censorship.
Well, I can't see how we could have more and more censorship than we've had in Australia. And it's growing.
I know.
It's growing every day. Every day there's new laws coming in to try to censor what other Australians say. Now, the Brownstone article about the change from Plan A to Plan B. Would you like to talk to us about that?
So I'm not sure if that's Dr. David Bell's article or not, but Dr.
Yes,
David Bell he's actually Australian, and he's a very good friend. Him and I have these intellectual conversations whether there is still need for public health, because he's a public health physician, and I'm of belief that public health has abandoned its duty and it should not exist anymore, and he obviously doesn't. But I would say that Dr. David Bell articles are very good, and his analysis on what's happening on the World Health Organization level, it's crucial. He also says, although the amendments have been watered down, we have to realize that they have passed essentially what they wanted to pass. And they did increase this whole idea of censorship and surveillance and put the financial infrastructure that they will need for when they start negotiating the pandemic treaty. Also,
and are they open about that censorship?
So they changed it. It used to be in one of the articles by itself, but they put it now in Annex 1. And there is one line that says that the countries are expected to control the misinformation. That's how they specifically say it.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yes.
The next thing I wanted you to comment on was, when did the link between COVID-19 and death, who made that link about the bioweapons, or, this is really hard to get your head around.
Mm-hmm.
that we'd have a situation where previously it's now a peer-reviewed article.
So I think what people need to realize that there is actually a really good article. I'm not sure exactly which one you're speaking about specifically, but recently Dr. Donzelli from Italy, he's now one of the FLCCC fellows, has looked at the analysis of the data from Italy, from Pescara. That data was actually originally looked at by Italian scientists, but he re-looked at it. And then he brought in some of the biases that the original analysis had. And what the data showed is that people who had the vaccine 1 or 2 actually had increase in mortality. And one of the things that the study did not look at, or what happened is, I don't know if you remember, but they changed the definition of who is vaccinated, what vaccinated is. So if you were vaccinated for 14 days, they considered you unvaccinated. And we all know from looking at the VAERS data that if someone was going to have a sudden event after vaccination, it happens in that 14-day period.
Yeah.
So they considered those reactions unvaccinated deaths. So the whole mortality has been truly calculated very wrongly by most of these mainstream scientists.
What was the basis of them saying after vaccination for 14 days you're not vaccinated?
Because they knew that most of the events, if they were going to happen within those 14 days.
But if you're a doctor who's just injected something into somebody, you can't just say, oh, by the way, you're not vaccinated for 14 days.
You would think so, right? You would also think that the doctors who have seen reactions in their own patients would not recommend second and third dose if the patient had the reaction the first time. But I would say that at large, the medical community has abandoned its own ethics, and our most important promise, which is primum non nocere, which means first do no harm.
Yeah.
So you would think that the doctors would have pushed back on that, because they know if someone gets a vaccine, in the past, you got the vaccine, you're considered vaccinated right away. We never waited for 14 days. But I think that came from the big pharma, from the original trials, because they realized that most of these events happen within the first 14 days. And that's why we don't have all the data from Pfizer. They had to get the FOIs and other documents.
That's criminal.
100%.
What else do you think an Australian politician needs to know, Kat?
I think they need to realize that they are humans as well, right? They have members of their own family who have gotten the vaccine, and some of them now have issues. And we need to start recognizing that our regulatory agencies around the world have abandoned their duties. I actually looked up the mission statement for the FDA and for CDC. Specifically for the FDA, their mission statement is to inform the consumers of risks. We have our own data, VAERS data. We all understand it's underreported. We have WHO pharmacovigilance data. I think it's called VG Access. We have UK data, yellow card. You all have your own reporting systems. The numbers are going up, but those numbers are ignored. And to me, it's unconscionable that we are still recommending a vaccine that has been proven to be not safe. It has been proven to be not effective, and we are still giving it. And we have given it to young children who now have myocarditis. I testified in front of CDC, it was CDC for the approval of the vaccine in children. It was done via Zoom. And as a physician, we have never normalized myocarditis in children. all of a sudden, we started hearing from pediatricians and from other doctors, oh, if the child comes in and they say they have chest pain, that's normal. It is not normal. Children don't just get chest pain and shortness of breath. Myocarditis is not mild. And we need to recognize that we have poisoned a large number of our own citizens, and the whole platform, the lipid nanoparticle and mRNA, needs to be abandoned, because the lie was that once you inject it here, it will stay here. It didn't stay here, it travels everywhere. We have studies showing that it accumulates in testes, in ovaries, in spleen. It can cross the blood-brain barrier. It can be transmitted from breastfeeding mother to the infant. We have all this, and we're still pushing the vaccine, and that's unconscionable.
When you put that to government, is there any response?
We have had hearings in the United States. We had Dr. Fauci, we have Peter Daszak for the gain of function research and different things like that. We had some journal editors, because physicians and scientists who are showing what's happening are not able to publish journals. They're not able to publish these articles. The problem is, and I'm sure this same thing is in Australia, you have these hearings and you have sound bites and nothing happens.
Absolutely correct. That's what happens here. Nothing. What do you think the background? I understand getting your head around something as grotesque as this could possibly happen. That's hard for everybody. It's been hard for me for the last 3 years. But what do you think this is now a cover-up? What's driving? I know you said their own children have been vaccinated. Is that what it is, that they're down a track now that there's no way for a doctor or specialist to back out of? Is that why nothing's happening? Is that why nothing's happening with politicians? Is that why nothing's happening with department heads? Where are the good men and women of this world who have a heart for the people, who will stand up and tell the truth, even at great cost to themselves?
I don't know. All I can say is I grew up in communism. I grew up in Yugoslavia. I left when I was 18, and I worked in Italy as a nanny, came to the States, was able to truly experience what American dream is, what freedom is. When this started happening, I looked at kind of the world. I always, actually, even from the beginning, I have a very, very early, one of probably my first podcast I've ever done with AJ Roberts from UK. And I said to him, we have to watch Australia, because Australia is essentially an island, and things that they're going to try to do around the world, they're going to try in Australia first. And I feel that they have, and I feel they have done that with the lockdowns, with people, having to be quarantined. I think they wanted to see how the population will react with mandates, with losing jobs. And I think Australia was almost like a globalist playground. And then they would kind of set it off in the rest of the world. One thing I realized, at least from the United States front, is this country, whether you believe in Second Amendment or not, and I'm not here to discuss our Second Amendment and right to bear arms for those who don't know, but I think this country, to a certain extent, because of that, and because of our Constitution, has pushed back more than they expected. And they were not able to push this agenda as far away as they wanted to. But essentially, I think the only way we can return to some kind of normalcy is Okay, I'll talk about EU for a moment. The same way Australia has been a playground for globalists, EU has been a playground for decades for globalists. And what the EU has done, I've realized this recently when I went to Croatia to testify in their parliament. EU has, over several decades and years, has tried to erase our national pride. You know, I'm always going to be, part of me is always going to be a Croat and part of me is an American. But I think what we need to remember, and the same for Australians, we have to remember our roots. We have to remember our pride. I'm sure you guys are proud to be Australians, and I'm looking forward to one day come and visit you and experience what Australia is. You know, when I think about Australia, right or wrong, I think of the outback. I want to, you know, I asked a friend of mine recently, what is like your national food? I want to experience Australia. And I think the only way we get out of this mess is we all remember who we are. Croats need to remember their Croatian roots. Americans have to stand strong in their constitution and our values. Australians have to remember who they are. New Zealand, the same way, every country. And then we just need to say to them, enough is enough. You cannot have any more of our land. You cannot have any more of our values. You cannot have any more of our history. And I think if we all start doing that, the rest will follow. Because I believe that has been this national, almost as if the smoke has been so stifling that they don't really see the horizon anymore. And I think we just need to show them what's at the end of the horizon.
Very beautiful and wise words to wind up on, Kat. And thank you so much for your courage that you have displayed over a long period of time now and standing up. And we pray for people like yourself every day that you will be protected and you will be cared for and your voice will be heard right around the world. And I'll be the first one to greet you when you come into the country here in Australia.
Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to it.
Thanks, Dr. Kat Lindley.